Will they or won't they? That question has become a regular one in the annals of television series for decades. Cheers, X-Files, Friends, heck, even Firefly. All of them had fans praying to the gods of all the networks that their pairing would actually just do it already. And in a lot of cases, they got their wish, for good or ill. But perhaps no other series played that game of tension and romance better and with more eyes on the couple in question than Moonlighting. The series that made Bruce Willis a household name and gave Sybil Shepherd the chance to stretch her comedic wings, Moonlighting was a weekly staple for 80s kids and adults. The series was unlike anything else on network TV at the time, and to this day is one of the most unique and, at least to me, favorite 80s shows ever. Moonlighting would break the rules and create new ones before all was said and done. On this episode of Gone But Not Forgotten, we've got a blue moon shining down on us as we slam a door or two when we revisit Moonlighting. Moonlighting was the brainchild of Glenn Gordon Caron. Caron was a writer, producer, and director who had already had successes in the industry with the series version of Breaking Away and Remington Steele. You may not remember how big a deal Remington Steele was when it started on NBC in 1982, but it was a massive hit. It made Pierce Brosnan a worldwide sensation. The series would eventually lead to him becoming James Bond. Remington Steele brought a classy, funny, and slick detective story to screens every week, and this would lead to ABC approaching Caron to do the same thing for them. They wanted a detective series, but Caron wasn't really interested in doing that again. He wanted something with more romance and fun. The network let him do just that, but in the guise of a detective show. The result was Moonlighting, which went beyond the concept of a detective story of the week, and, well, just beyond. How do you describe Moonlighting to someone who has never watched it? Well, I'm going to try, and we'll use a cocktail metaphor because I think it's accurate. Take The Thin Man, a bit of The Three Stooges, a bit of Deadpool, Shakespeare, some bluesy rock and roll, and a lot of 1940s comedy, and toss it all in a blender with some champagne and beer. Voila! You've got Moonlighting. The series follows Maddie Hayes, a beautiful ex-model who had been very successful years earlier doing ads for brands like Blue Moon Shampoo. One day she wakes up to find she's close to broke after she finds out her accountant has stole all of her money. Her investment businesses need to be sold off quickly, and that's when she discovers she's the owner of a detective agency. Maddie goes into the office of City of Angels detective agency and meets the guy in charge, David Addison. Addison is a smartass and runs the company in a way that clashes hard with Maddie's strictly business type attitude. But eventually, the two discover that opposites attract, as well as work well together. Between David's street smarts and Maddie's connections and fame, they start solving cases and become partners with the newly titled Blue Moon Detective Agency. David and Maddie clashed often, with an ongoing routine of each of them slamming their respective office doors after an argument. Usually caught up in the middle of this was Miss DePesto, the agency's receptionist and a lyrical genius who made every phone call a rhyming masterpiece with her greeting. Miss DePesto was a sweet, awkward, yet determined employee who was loyal to each of her bosses. Moonlighting would stretch beyond the mystery of the week's story, which is what motivated the network to greenlight Moonlighting and would become a mix of genres stretching from soapy romance, comedy, fantasy, and even period piece and musical. This was before a musical episode became a regular thing you would see on shows like Eli Stone, Buffy, Glee, and years before Cop Rock would grace the same network. Caron says that the series was inspired by The Taming of the Shrew, which focused on an ice queen of a woman being thawed by the advances and love of a rogue of a husband. Caron has also said he was a few episodes deep into writing the show when he realized he'd been subconsciously thinking of Sybil Shepherd the entire time as Maddie. Shepherd had made a name for herself with roles in The Last Picture Show and Taxi Driver, as well as other roles in TV and made-for-TV movies. Shepherd had a classic movie star look and quality about her that made her a perfect fit for Maddie. At the time, Shepherd was looking for something that would be a major hit. Moonlighting fit the bill. David Addison needed to be able to pull off the being a smartass while also being the charming guy you underestimate. He had to be a counterpoint to Maddie and hold his own with Sybil Shepherd. Bruce Willis was not a well-known name when he auditioned for the role. The team had seen nearly 3,000 actors. It's been reported when Willis showed up and they immediately stopped looking. Willis had only a handful of credits to his name when he got the male lead in Moonlighting, but it has to be said no one else could have done it. Alice Beasley was cast as Miss DePesto. Beasley had a great comedic ability and a voice that was distinctive. She had also worked in TV series like Cheers prior to auditioning multiple times for the supporting role. The role would eventually become more and more prominent as the series ran. One notable episode in season 1 of the series would feature Beasley having a romantic plot with her then husband, the late Vincent Schiavelli. Next Stop Murder would take place during a murder mystery on a train and, well, things don't go as planned for Miss DePesto. Curtis Armstrong would be cast as Herbert Viola about halfway through the series run. Viola was a love interest for Miss DePesto, as well as another detective for Blue Moon eventually. Armstrong was an icon of the 80s thanks to his work in films like The Revenge of the Nerds franchise, Better Off Dead, and One Crazy Summer, just to name a few.
Big deal. Did you get in her pants?
She's not that kind of a girl, Booger.
Why? Does she have a penis?
Armstrong's comedic flair was a great fit for the show, and much like Miss DePesto, Herbert's role would be expanded too. Moonlighting would premiere on March 3rd, 1985, and would become a massive hit for ABC. It was one of those rare series where the network owned everything, so the profit margin was huge, and it also allowed the production team to do what they wanted. The problem was that the budgets were too high. Series like Moonlighting would typically come in under $1 million per episode, but not Maddie and David. They would reach nearly 1.5 to 2 million at some points. This wasn't the only problem with the show, which would eventually become notorious for off-screen drama and fighting that would rival the biggest blow-ups of Maddie and David. In fact, it would seem in some episodes Moonlighting would embrace the gossip and drama that was being reported out to the world. It wouldn't be surprising to think that some viewers might get confused on if Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis were actually their characters in real life, or vice versa. Production on the series steadily became more difficult due to long shoots and massive scripts for a 1-hour series. This was because of the sort of show Karen and the writers wanted to make, which was a throwback in many ways to the fast-talking mystery comedies of the 30s and 40s. Dialogue was at a breakneck pace, and the stories moved fast. I always compare Moonlighting's dynamic duo to Nick and Nora from the classic film The Thin Man. This was what Karen was going for with Moonlighting, but films are more elaborate than TV shows, yet that's the standard that Karen wanted. So the pressure was on both Shepherd and Willis to have that chemistry ready to go. However, things could only continue for so long before production started to run behind, and Moonlighting would become notorious when it came to having new episodes ready to air. This would happen so often the network spun it into a joke, with the ad campaigns for the series were built around it. Shoots for episodes would become 13-hour-a-day marathons, and the actors would receive scripts the same day they arrived on set with new dialogue. They were expected to read it, remember it, and be ready to do it in front of the cameras. It was grueling and rough, and for Shepherd, it started to take a toll. Coming from a mostly film background and already having a big career, this sort of marathon wasn't what she had in mind. Willis and Karen were game for this sort of workload though, at least at the beginning. Willis was just starting out for the most part and was willing to do whatever it took, but Sybil was in many ways under more pressure due to the usual expectations of being the female lead. So late shoots, last minute redos, and trying to work around her requests created friction with Bruce Willis. As the show and his own career progressed, he would start making demands of his own. The tension between Maddie and David in the show was nothing compared to what was happening in real life, if you believe the stories. As the series progressed, it would evolve into a fourth wall breaking monster in the ratings. Watching Moonlighting would almost feel like you were peeking into another universe, where the TV series was a real place, and the characters knew you were there along for the ride. There'd be episodes where David Addison would look at the camera and wink, either metaphorically or for real. Characters would mention the writers, or they'd say something to the effect of, quote, "We need to kill a minute before the next scene. how's your day? Unquote. Moonlighting really did live up to Karen's goals of feeling like a classic movie every episode for a number of them. The second season's second episode, The Lady in the Iron Mask, was a standout to me because of the insanely funny chase at the end. David, Maddie, and our client are all dressed in the same black short skirt and veil combination and wind up chasing down a similarly dressed bad guy to the tune of the William Tell Overture. It's a scene straight out of a Three Stooges gag, with maybe more than a little cartoon shenanigans in the mix. Sybil Shepherd was also another facet of that classic movie plan. The showrunners made it a point to dress her and shoot her like a 1940s femme fatale. Her wardrobe was planned to emphasize her in that old school way, and it worked. Karen would even bring in directors like Stanley Donen, the man responsible for Singin' in the Rain, just to film a dream sequence dance number for the third season episode Big Man on Mulberry Street. The song of the same name was actually written by Billy Joel and was inspired by the series. Pedigree enough? No? Well, how's about this? In the second season, Moonlighting went full noir with the dream sequence Always Rings Twice. The episode went black and white for some of its runtime. It looks amazing, and he made a point of shooting it in two styles of black and white, type used by Warner Brothers back in the day, and the MGM style. He said in an interview that maybe he was a pretentious ass for going that far, but I'm Team Karen on this one. The episode was amazing, showing how overt Moonlighting could go when it came to doing whatever it wanted. And to top that off, it was the final appearance of Orson Welles before he passed away only a week after shooting his introduction for the episode. Years later, TV Guide chose that episode as one of its 100 greatest TV episodes of all time. Season 3 was when things started to take a turn for the show. That season, Willis and Shepherd's rocky relationship was ramping up on set, and some other factors started happening that was going to change the entire trajectory of the series. Many people hate on season 3 of Moonlighting, but one of my all-time favorite episodes came out of that season. Atomic Shakespeare was another of those weirdly meta before that was a thing episodes. The bookend was a young boy who was wanting to watch Moonlighting, but his mom makes him go read Shakespeare because he's got a test the next day. We never see their faces. Think Muppet Babies Nanny. But the boy goes to read and imagines into The Taming of the Shrew with Moonlighting characters. The episode is packed with sight gags, such as David Petruccio's horse having a BMW saddle blanket and sunglasses that match his owner's. Maddie, Kate, is the shrewish sister to DePesto, Bianca, the girl everyone loves. Herbert Lucencio is the suitor for Bianca that set Petruccio on his path to woo Kate. The episode is filled with what I love about Moonlighting. There's a song and dance number at the wedding, jokes, gags, witty dialogue, and also a dramatic side with a lot of heart. Since the original Shakespeare play was the inspiration for the series, you knew this would be special. And what the episode does is switch things up and fix what a lot of readers over the years have thought about this particular story. Sadly, our bookend tale ends with the boy not getting to see the episode that night, but his mom lets him know it wasn't that good anyway. As an aside, they actually showed this episode in my high school English class to help us grasp Shakespeare. I was the only one excited about it because I had taste. But while there are some standouts and interesting ways the show worked around its issues, this really was the beginning of the end of Moonlighting, which would manage to get 2 more seasons out, but just barely. David and Maddie finally consummated their love, answering the will they, won't they in season 3's I Am Curious, Maddie. At the time, Shepherd was very pregnant with twins, so much so that the love scene was actually filmed using some trick photography. The 2 actors were standing up and leaning against a wall that was made to look like a sheet-covered bed. Shepherd is wrapped in a sheet the entire time to cover her pregnancy. Immediately after this, she was put on bed rest by her doctor. That same year, Bruce Willis would break his clavicle, causing even more delays. Trick photography was used quite a bit due to the now chaotic shooting schedule and availability of the actors. There was a fight scene in a parking garage between Willis and Mark Harmon, who played Maddie's love interest. Karen stated that none of the actors were actually together in that scene at all. It was trick shots and body doubles that made it work. Then Die Hard happened, and that was sort of it. Die Hard was a massive hit, and by God, it's a Christmas movie. Sorry. So, with Willis's career exploding and a lack of motivation for both his stars to actually keep going with the show, change happened. Miss DePesto and Herbert were made a focus of episodes, with one season 4 episode being entirely about them. And while the characters and actors were fantastic, fans wanted David and Maddie. Episodes were written around Shepard while she was having twins and staying at home. Willis on his own could be entertaining, but again, fans were there for the relationship of David and Maddie, and it felt off not having that be the center of the show. Maddie was written into being pregnant, and this became a plotline throughout season 4. Then season 5 happened, and its premiere is probably the most bizarre thing I've ever watched. I think I forgot about this episode, or maybe blocked it from my poor, fragile mind at the time it aired. But the episode, A Womb with a View, tackles the very serious subject of a miscarriage in a way that floored me. Bruce Willis in a onesie is in fact Maddie's unborn baby, giving us an answer, I suppose, on who the father is. We're going to assume it's Addison's. Baby Bruce, I'm calling him that, is shown in a strange womb set talking to a guardian angel who tells him all about what life is and who his parents are. He's going to be born and is going to be great. And then plans change. Maddie miscarries the baby, and in an oddly beautiful yet completely bizarre sequence, the angel explains to the baby that all souls are born and he will still be born, but to another set of parents. They then, and I kid you not, tap dance off singing into heaven. After rewatching this episode, I'm still in awe that this happened on network television. The final episode of the season is the last of the series and ends with another super meta moment where David and Maddie see the sets of Moonlighting being broken down after they try to find a way to stop it from being canceled and fail. The ratings by this point had hit rock bottom for the series, and with it being so expensive to produce and the obvious desire of both its leads to be set free, ABC pulled the plug. Moonlighting, with all the drama behind the scenes, was and still is one of my favorite series. Karen and company created something unique and ahead of its time, but also right on time. It was water cooler TV, but had enough of a strangeness that it still stands out. Sybil Shepherd was perfect as Maddie, as I said, but I really want to call out how absolutely genetically engineered Bruce Willis was to be David Addison. He could sing, dance, and wasn't afraid to be a goofball. He could rattle off witty banter and looked great even when he was disheveled. And when the scenes needed it, he could slip into romantic mode or drama mode without missing a beat. That's what made David Addison such a great character and why you could see Maddie fall for the guy, because Willis made him real and likable. I mentioned the singing and dancing, and that's another place where Moonlighting stood out, the music. The theme song was by Lee Holdridge and the legendary Al Jarreau, which was also performed by Jarreau. This was in those days of theme songs for TV shows being as important as the show itself. The show had all kinds of fantastic music it utilized, and this is part of the reason you can't find it streaming anywhere. Music rights are a pain. Moonlighting was released on DVD back in the early 2000s, but has since gone out of print. But even in that video release, the music was changed, notably in that awesome chase sequence I mentioned earlier. So, unless you were one of the lucky ones that snagged the DVD set, you can't find Moonlighting to watch anywhere, at least not yet. Late last year, Karen has stated that there was work beginning on getting Moonlighting up to streaming snuff. However, I have some good news for you Moonlighting fans. Upon my research, I found most of the episodes on YouTube, so watch it while you still can. You're welcome. I know you're wondering about if Moonlighting should make a return of some sort. At one point many moons ago, there was talk of it. Sybil Shepherd, even though the title of her book she released in 2000 was How I Survived Beauty Pageants, Elvis, Sex, Bruce Willis, Lies, Marriage, Motherhood, Hollywood, and the Irrepressible Urge to Say What I Think. Whew. Give me a second. Has said she'd be willing to come back to the role a few years ago. But with the news of Bruce Willis's retirement due to his health diagnosis of aphasia, the original duo will most likely not reunite on screen again. And you know, I don't think that's a bad thing. Moonlighting was truly Maddie and David a la Sybil and Bruce. You can't recreate this show and keep the weird and wonderful vibe that it had these days. It was a lightning in a bottle moment. You had perfect stars cast in roles that would catapult them to another level of fame. You had a creator who wasn't afraid to push the limit of what a network TV show in the 80s could be and go beyond the pale with story ideas. You had a who's who of list of guest stars and legends that showed up to take part in the fun. Moonlighting shined bright and still does. So, thank you Sybil, Bruce, and all the gang for letting us join you for the song and dance. Some walk by night, some fly by day. Nothing could change you, and might I add, nothing should.
I love it when a plan comes together.
The 80s saw a massive upsurge in entertainment, showcasing Vietnam veterans in one form or another on screen. Films like Missing in Action and First Blood, for example, started a subgenre in feature films all about the badass veteran coming back for revenge or rescuing fellow soldiers. On a small screen, this would happen as well, with series like Airwolf that we covered previously, or Magnum P.I. Tour of Duty actually took place during the Vietnam War. But none of these movies or series were anything like the TV show we're talking about on this episode. A cornerstone of every 80s kid's childhood, the A-Team gave us a group of heroes unlike any we'd ever seen before or since. We've got a problem and no one else can help, so let's learn about the A-Team on this entry of Gone But Not Forgotten. The A-Team came from the genius TV mind of Stephen J. Cannell and Frank Lupo, who together created a number of classic series like Riptide and Wise Guy. NBC was looking for an interesting premise that they could stick a newly iconic Mr. T in the middle of. What Brandon Tartikoff asked for was something like the Dirty Dozen. He'd seen Mr. T in Rocky III and was impressed. Cannell and Lupo came up with the now iconic story which began in every episode.
In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison
By a military court for a crime they didn't commit.
These men promptly escaped from a maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground.
Today, still wanted by the government,
Survive as soldiers of fortune.
if you have a problem,
No one else can help.
and if you can find them,
Maybe you can hire the
A-Team.
A-Team.
The series would become a massive hit, which surprised a lot of people at NBC, but not 80s kids who were entranced by this team of misfits in their awesome van. The A-Team played more like a Saturday morning cartoon in a lot of ways. The characters were over the top, and even though there was a ton of explosions and guns being fired, the series barely had anyone ever die. Think G.I. Joe and the fact that Duke could take a live cobra being embedded in his chest and just having a brief hospital stay. That sort of violence. The A-Team would air for 5 seasons on NBC, and there would be a few cast changes over the years, but the core group would remain the same: Hannibal, B.A., Face, and Murdoch. The team, as the intro states, was scapegoated for a crime which was actually a covert mission. The mission was stealing gold from the Bank of Hanoi. When the plan goes awry and their commanding officer is killed, they have no way of proving their innocence and go on the run. So here's the dossier for the A-Team. Hannibal Smith is the leader of the team. He is great at making plans and really loves it when they come together. He's an actor when not running missions, which is an interesting choice for someone supposedly in hiding, but these gigs make for some hilarious hijinks. Hannibal loves his team as much as he loves his cigars. So, a lot. He's rough around the edges but has a heart and glimmer in his eye when he's on the jazz.
That's what kept him alive through Nam. Kept me and the others alive also.
When that glimmer shows up and the jazz is flowing through his veins,
And why do you do it?
For the jazz, baby.
the team knows they're in for it.
Like walking into a casino in Vegas, laying down your money on the crap table and winning on the first roll. You can't walk away. You just can't. You know you can beat them because you just done it.
Hannibal was played by classic movie actor George Peppard. While Peppard would forever be linked to the A-Team, he'd be as well known for his co-starring role in Breakfast at Tiffany's opposite Audrey Hepburn. He'd star in a number of feature films as well as do theater work. In the late 70s, he'd have the lead role in the crime series Banachek. But Peppard was a troubled soul who butted heads with actors, producers, and directors. He also had a drinking problem and would smoke a lot. He almost didn't get to do the A-Team because he was originally offered the role of Blake Carrington on Dynasty, something he argued himself out of and quit because of issues with the showrunners. That role would go to John Forsythe, another classic actor. Peppard would wind up working with the king of the bees, Roger Corman, after Dynasty fell through on Battle Beyond the Stars, creating the iconic Space Cowboy. This would see him paired with another popular legendary TV actor, Robert Vaughn, something that would play into later choices for the A-Team. Templeton Peck, aka the Face Man, was the resident player of the bunch. Peck was called Face because he was the, quote, pretty one.
Now this is more like it.
Or the charmer. Peck was the hustler and knew how to wile his way into the places the team needed to go for missions. This usually saw him partnered with one of the other members, and more than once things went wrong. Face was an interesting casting for a couple of reasons. First, Dirk Benedict wasn't the first actor in the show to play him. This was something I was floored by a few years ago when I went to rewatch the series. I guess 8-year-old me didn't have the best memory. Be that as it may, the first actor to play Face in a pilot is a name not unfamiliar to viewers of Gone But Not Forgotten. Actor Tim Dunnigan, who would go on to be Captain Power, was Face in the pilot, but the powers that be, that's a pun, didn't feel Dunnigan looked the part after filming. He was too young to be a Vietnam vet and, oddly, considered too tall, so Dunnigan was Face for only the 2-part pilot, Mexican Sleigh Ride. It would be in the second full episode of the series, Children of Jamestown, a very dark episode that follows a Jim Jones type cult leader played by John Saxon that would see Dirk Benedict flash that Face Man smile. Benedict had hit big with his role as Starbuck in the original Battlestar Galactica and was a staple on television, having acted in a number of features as well. Thanks to Starbuck, he already had that hustler, Han Solo-like persona, and that played well into the character. Howling Mad Murdoch was the pilot of the team. Funny enough, he was the one member who hadn't actually been charged. Murdoch was certified crazy.
I'm not nuts.
And placed in a VA home from which he routinely escaped. Seeing some of the perks he somehow managed to obtain, you'd wonder why he'd want to. Murdoch was always sort of an enigma because you had to wonder just how crazy, if at all, he was.
Telling everybody, don't you think I want to get out of here and see E.T. just like everybody else?
He was super loyal to his team. He was genius when it came to anything that could fly, and could switch from being a lovable goofball making BA's life hell,
Warning you, sucker. Any more of this TV talk and I'ma snap off your rabbit ears for good.
into a serious threat at the flip of a ball cap. He was also my favorite team member because he was fantastic, funny, and played perfectly by actor Dwight Schultz, who gave his all for each of Murdoch's personalities.
I feel a new identity coming on. I feel it.
Schultz was a theater actor and worked with Frank Langella and the man himself, Tom Atkins, on Broadway and Sherlock Holmes.
I stopped in a place called Beaumont, Texas. There was a gas station. This guy came out wearing a little blue hat. Can I help you? I have to make a phone call. I'm stuck in Beaumont, Texas. I said my car ran off the road because I ran over a lot of frogs. Wait a minute. What are you? You're an actor? He said, no, wait a minute. Are you famous? No. Well, if you're not famous, why would anybody pay to see you? So anyway, that was Murdoch.
He'd go on to work with Paul Newman in Fat Man and the Little Boy as Robert Oppenheimer. But TV would really be the place Schultz flourished, as would his voice acting. This would be very useful in the A-Team thanks to Murdoch's proclivity for becoming other people.
I get tired of Ozzy and Murdoch, or I Love Murdoch, or Murdoch for a day. I just flip through the dial and it's time for Bachelor Murdoch, or Have Murdoch Will Travel. Like this. Now it's time for the weather.
Besides the A-Team though, Schultz would cement himself in the annals of Star Trek thanks to his role as Lieutenant Barclay, a fan favorite to Trekkies everywhere. B.A. Baracus. The initials didn't stand for badass, but for bad attitude. Remember kids, this was 80s network TV, was the engineer and the muscle. And I do mean muscle. His actual name is Brosco, but he's always called B.A. by his crew. Played by Mr. T, B.A. was a whole lot of T. Sporting the mohawk, the chains, a love for kids, loyalty to his friends, and his mama. Mr. T was a phenomenon in the 80s. If you didn't grow up in that time, you'd have no idea just how big he was. Mr. T got his role in Rocky III after being discovered by Sly Stallone. Stallone expanded the role of Clubber Lang for the actor, and the rest is history. Mr. T would show up everywhere, including having his own cartoon series. Now, one character that needs to be included in this lineup is Amy Amanda Allen. Amy wasn't part of the crew in Vietnam. For one thing, she was way too young. Amy was a reporter that in the first episode winds up hiring the guys and eventually joins them. She was a bit naive, but eventually grows to deal with the crazy that's being part of the team. She was a nice person to have around too, as she wasn't actually wanted by the police. Actress Melinda Kalia, who played Amy, was known for her work in television. While Amy may not have been as showy a character as the rest of the guys, it was nice to see a woman getting to hold her own eventually with the crew.
It was the last truly masculine show.
Awesome! If I was smart, I wouldn't be working some skirt with no money. I've hooked up with the skirt.
Amy, break out your heels, honey. You're going in.
Place the button on the collar with one from the kid.
Bringing me along to show how wonderfully sexist.
No, we each do what we have to do. If you think you can pick these 3 locks in 10 minutes, and...
Unfortunately, as would happen quite a bit on the show, George Peppard liked to throw his weight around, and when Peppard was unhappy, he wasn't shy about letting it be known. The story seems to be that Melinda Kalia and George Peppard didn't get along, mainly because Peppard wasn't happy with the character on the show. At the time, Kalia wanted Amy to be more in the fray during the action sequences instead of having to be the damsel in distress.
Is that why she was dropped, or why the character was dropped?
We don't know, although we were blamed for it. I just one day found out.
I'm trying to squeeze in. I'm working very hard at fitting in with the 4 guys.
Do you have the spirit of adventure that would allow you to do some of these things for real?
Yes. There's a lot of it that involves with human compassion, because the people that we're always going and saving are being dealt with dishonestly. And that's the reason I really like the A-Team. These guys really get it done.
She was complaining a lot, so I know and we were a hit. We were #1 show, and they didn't need that. And I think they just thought, you know, this is tiresome.
Perfectly comfortable then on a set where you're the only woman.
It's always different. Yeah, sometimes I'm a buddy, and then sometimes they spoil me.
Eventually, after 2 seasons, Amy was gone from the show, and another female reporter named Tanya was brought in, who eventually was written out of the show after 1 season.
My first day of work, I showed up. George was in the makeup trailer. He said, "When you're finished with your makeup, I would like to talk to you. Please come to my trailer." He said, "I just want you to know that we don't want you on the show. None of the guys want you here." He said, "The network and the producers want you. For some reason, they think they need a girl."
With the lineup in place, the A-Team blew up, no pun intended, on NBC. Kids ate it up, and adults actually did too. Even though there was guns, violence, and car chases, and airplane chases, no one ever died in the show except one character in season 4. General Fulbright, who had actually shown up in a few episodes over the years, had the distinction of being the only character to die. This leads me to believe the villains in the A-Team went to the same weapons training as the stormtroopers in Star Wars. To fans, this lack of depth and accuracy of aim would become a running joke. The A-Team apparently had more lives than Vin's family. Family, 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 family. The series plots were fairly standard. Someone needs the A-Team to either rescue a loved one or stop some major bad guys. The team would show up in the most awesome van ever to be in existence, through some trickery and even more awesome montage footage. Save the day. Usually, these plots involved Hannibal quitting during filming a movie, Face breaking out Murdoch from the VA hospital, and BA having to be knocked out before having to get on an airplane.
Sounds like an airplane to me.
Well, it's probably the gorilla's airplane.
If that's Murdoch, I'm not getting in the air with that crazy sucker.
BA hates flying and was terrified of it. This was part of the reason he and Murdoch were usually at odds, because he knew he'd probably be getting roofied.
Thanks, Hannibal.
It's okay, pal.
All right.
Why does he always fall on the horn?
Beats me.
Honestly, BA should have brain damage or some sort of condition for the amount of drugs they administered him over the seasons. All of this while General Lynch was trying to track the team down, with them narrowly escaping. The A-Team was well known for montages. This usually entailed tearing apart the van or modifying it in some battle beast way, and welding. I have no idea how they'd get the van back to normal, but once again, no one ever died from these creations. Mike Post's epic music would play over these as it did at the beginning of each episode. The A-Team would see a number of guest stars over the 5 seasons it aired. This would include a large number of professional wrestlers thanks to Mr. T's connections to the wrestling world. One of the most famous was the time Hulk Hogan was on the show. Boy George, yes, that Boy George, Pat Sajak and Vanna White were featured in an episode where Murdoch wins on Wheel of Fortune. Rick James and Isaac Hayes were also guest stars. It was a pretty impressive run of familiar faces. But as I said before, George Peppard wasn't easy to get along with. Papard's drinking was legendary, and it actually brought him to the point where he was told, "The A-Team is your last chance." But even with that warning, Papard wasn't really dissuaded from making problems. As said, he butted heads with Melinda Kalia.
I'll be damned.
No. You'll be a princess in a world full of dragons.
But he also butted heads with Mr. T. Papard grew angry when he found out the Mohawk sporting actor was being paid more than he was. Things grew tense enough that at one point Mr. T simply left during the filming of the 4th season premiere. A death in his family had happened and the shoot was happening on a cruise ship. So Mr. T simply got on a plane and left when it all got too much. The show nearly fired him, but they reached an understanding. In fact, Hulk Hogan's appearance on the show was due to the fact that he was one of the few people that could get along with Papard and Mr. T. When the 5th season rolled around, the ratings had plummeted and so had morale. So the format was changed along with the regulars. Tia Carrera was to be a regular, but her character was written out and Eddie Velez was added to the cast as Frankie Santana. The team would be pardoned in a way, and in return it would work for General Stockwell, played by Man from U.N.C.L.'s Robert Vaughn. At one point there was a mini Man from U.N.C.L. reunion when David McCallum appeared as an old associate of Stockwell's. Season 5 really played up the uncle aspect with the casting. It was hoped his involvement would smooth things over and help increase the ratings. A show that primarily had kids as its main audience, going with a TV series from the 60s as its Hail Mary play, was an odd choice, and sadly it was a fumble.
I'm sorry, Tanya, I had to.
Had to. Hey!
Bitches leave.
The 5th season would be the A-Team's last. The A-Team was a fantastic series. It was fun, crazy, and could go oddly dark. There were toys, books, comics, and more. I loved the 6-inch figures Galoob made and owned Murdoch because he was my favorite. Sorry, Mr. T, but I still want to know what the hell was up with those 3.75-inch figures. What the hell are they wearing? Granted, this group of toys even had a bad guy set you could buy, all of them named after snakes. Where have I heard of bad guys and snakes being a thing? It's interesting to note that even though there was an Amy figure created, she's not even shown on any of the packaging. The A-Team would go on to influence a lot of pop culture, and the original series continues to influence filmmakers, writers, and fans to this day. It's pretty amazing when you go online and find fans not even alive at the time the show aired, writing and creating art based off it. So we have come to the question that we always ask in every episode: should the A-Team come back? The answer, it already did. In 2010, Joe Carnahan directed and co-wrote a fantastic version of the A-Team for today. It was cast with some of the biggest names in Hollywood, with Bradley Cooper as Face, Liam Neeson as Hannibal, Sharlto Copley as Murdoch, and Quentin Rampage Jackson as B.A. The film moved the team from Vietnam to Iraq. Jessica Biel was in charge of bringing the team to justice after they are scapegoated for a mission that goes horribly wrong. They go on a run and clear their names. Patrick Wilson would show up as the mysterious Lynch. Brian Bloom actually co-wrote the script and played bad guy Pike. The film was fun, kept what made the series great, the cast had fantastic chemistry, and this was evident from the press rounds. Most of the cast had grown up watching the show sans Neeson, who was the oldest of the group. Copley filmed videos in his own hotel room as Murdoch to campaign for the part. As a bonus for fans, Dwight Schultz and Dirk Benedict would show up in cameos. Mr. T declined. By this time, after a 3-pack-a-day habit along with cigars, the cigars in the show were actually real, by the way, and his, George Papard had passed away in 1994 from pneumonia while battling lung cancer. I always hold the A-Team movie up as how to do a reboot. It was fantastic, and yes, there are toys. Unfortunately, it didn't deliver at the box office, making a little over $80 million over its $110 million budget worldwide. I think part of this was due to marketing. It just wasn't marketed well. While it had Bradley Cooper as a major face, no pun intended, of the movie, his fans going to see him in it just didn't know what the A-Team was. I saw this movie at least 3 times in the theater, and when I saw people leaving when the credits started, I told the 2 gals in front of me, "Hey, the TV show stars are going to show up in a second." And they turned and looked at me blinking, "What do you mean TV show?" And I thought, oh, you're here for Bradley Cooper. Sadly, due to the box office, the planned sequel never happened. I mean, the film even ends with John Hamm showing up as another Lynch, an obvious setup for more films. So, 12 years after the film came out, should the A-Team come back? I for sure wouldn't say no to a sequel with the crew from the film. These characters are great and are not tied to a specific era. In 2015, there was talk of a reboot series on Fox, but since then nothing has materialized. To be honest, I'm sort of glad. The 2010 film did such a great job, I sort of find it hard to see anyone doing better. The good news is that you can see the full 5 seasons of the original series on the free streaming service Tubi. But even if we never get another shot at the A-Team, that's okay. If we're ever in trouble and looking for something to watch to save us from the everyday and nothing else can stop the boredom, we know where to find the A-Team.
Oh well.
The 80s became the first major decade of comic book entertainment on the big and small screen. This was truly heralded in with 2 releases that happened at the tail end of the 70s, Superman and The Incredible Hulk. The combined powers of Marvel and DC showed us that comic book characters and those sorts of stories could actually be filmed in a real-world setting with real people appearing to fly around and save the day. Cue the awe-inspiring music when Stephen J. Cannell decided to create his own hero. This time the hero wouldn't be from another planet, he'd be a hometown guy. His powers wouldn't be from some accident involving radiation, they'd come from aliens, who would be from another planet of course. The greatest American hero would fly, badly, onto TV screens in 1981, right between 2 Superman film releases, and would capture the hearts of kids and adults alike. It would also give us a theme song that will never leave your head after you watch this video. So let's suit up and try not to crash as we jump into the story of the greatest American hero. And don't forget your dog biscuits. The Greatest American Hero premiered on ABC in 1981 and was formed by the combined powers of TV mega-wizards Frank Lupo and Stephen J. Cannell. Lupo was the man behind series like The A-Team, Riptide, and Wise Guy, all of which he created with Cannell. On his own, he'd have series like BJ and the Bear and Werewolf under his belt. What I'm saying is Lupo had an eclectic history when it came to TV. From monkeys to lycanthropies, it makes sense he'd be part of the team to create a show like The Greatest American Hero.
Am I wrong?
The same goes for Cannell,
Am I wrong?
who has a list of shows that would take the entirety of this video just to name a few. The Greatest American Hero follows the story of Ralph. We'll get into his last name a little while later. Ralph is a high school teacher in LA. During a field trip, he runs into a group of aliens in a very large spacecraft. Think a Flat Earth Close Encounters of the Third Kind ship. The aliens give Ralph the gift of a suit, and an instruction book for the suit which will give him extraordinary powers that he needs to help keep humanity safe and on the path of good. In this endeavor, he's to have as his partner FBI agent Bill Maxwell, a crotchety fellow who Ralph has run into seemingly by chance. Ralph almost immediately loses the instruction book, which leads to a George of the Jungle level trial and error in figuring out how the powers work, what powers he has, and a really rough time trying to figure out how to land. Ralph and Bill are assisted in their cases by Ralph's lawyer girlfriend, Pam Davidson. Ralph's class of students are also featured in the episodes, with a number of them recurring. When the show had first been picked up by ABC, Cannell had wanted to focus on more serious subjects throughout the series, instead of physical save-the-day comic book fare. He wanted to focus more on Ralph's world and dealing with having the suit and how he would deal with the changes it would force him to go through. This would fit right in with today's comic book media, and certainly would be a great show to watch. How does a reluctant everyman deal with having the powers of basically a god, and how would he use them? Would he use them? And how would he pick and choose when to? All of this combined with keeping your identity secret, because if you don't, you know your world will implode. You and everyone you love will become a target of someone. But the original executives at ABC left, and the new team decided to make the show more along the lines that would appeal to kids. This back and forth led to the series having a mix of slapstick level physical comedy, moments of seriousness, and some interesting sci-fi, as well as one horror-centric episode. It was clear that the showrunners wanted to go in some interesting directions, but were hampered by decisions at the network level that kept them from pursuing them. I mentioned that we get into Ralph's last name at some point, so let's do that now. Depending on the episode you've heard, it was Hinckley and then became Hanley.
Name's Ralph Hinckley, Tony.
Something's happened to her, Mr. Haley.
This happened within the first few episodes of the first season and was due to the assassination attempt on President Reagan. When the powers that be heard the name of the attempted killer was John Hinckley Jr., they didn't want any sort of connection to be made between a show called The Greatest American Hero and a man who just tried to murder the president. So, with some dubbing and quick rewrites, the similar sounding but not exact name Hanley became Ralph's last name. The show had a stellar lead cast that were part of the reason it was such a hit and has continued to be a fan favorite. William Katt was Ralph. Katt had an impressive string of films under his belt before being cast in the TV series. He co-starred opposite Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey in the surfer flick Big Wednesday, as well as the western Butch and Sundance, the early days as the Sundance Kid. Prior to The Greatest American Hero, though, Katt would be best remembered as the Golden Boy, Tommy Ross, and Carrie. He brought a likability to Ralph that needed to be there and was able to embody the humor in some of the scenes. He really wanted to be a good person and be there for his students. Katt brought that realness and, when called for, the emotional punch. One interesting fact, though, William Katt hated the suit. Through the run, you'll notice a number of the blue screen shots will be reused, and in certain flying scenes, Ralph's hair will suddenly go back to its season 1 glory. Part of this was due to Katt and the producers figuring out a compromise on cutting down the time he had to wear it. It was pretty form-fitting, so yeah, I get it. Connie Sellecca was Pam. Sellecca had an interesting career prior to Hero as well. A beautiful woman, Sellecca began as a fashion model and made her way to acting. She'd done some interesting genre entries prior to the series, having acted in the second Captain America live-action movie, as well as the Beyond Westworld television series. Pam was only supposed to be a one-off character. At first, she served as Ralph's divorce attorney, but Sellecca worked so well as the character they made her a regular. Now let's talk my favorite character in the show.
Pam Davidson, my attorney. This is Bill Maxwell. We're in the superhero business together.
I know, everyone loves Ralph. What's wrong with you? But I loved Bill. He was grouchy, snarky, and was freaking Robert Culp.
What happened to the presumption of innocence?
Don't give me that garbage.
Culp was a TV and film legend when he joined Greatest American Hero, and he also wrote and directed on some of his previous series, including I Spy. He continued this with Hero.
We need organization. We need command decisions, and we need them now. Command decisions happen to be my forte now.
That's forte.
Writing and directing 2 great episodes, including what would wind up being the series finale. One thing I never knew to be true was, apparently, he really did eat dog treats. Those weren't fake. Bill was just a wonderfully weird character. But the thing about Bill that Robert Culp was so great at doing was showing the warm, fuzzy side of him beneath that gruff exterior and milk-bone breath.
He was supremely confident, and like most people who are supremely confident, very, very vulnerable.
Sadly, Robert Culp would pass away after an accidental fall in 2010 at the age of 79. He was still writing and planning on continuing to direct.
And the more human you can make the character, the funnier you can make him.
Confession time. As a kid, after watching this show and learning to love Bill, I tried to eat a damn milk bone. It did not go well.
You all right?
I could only assume Bill Maxwell had no taste buds left. Ralph's high school students had a couple standout actors of note. Faye Grant was just about the same age as Connie Sellecca when she played high schooler Rhonda in the show. She'd go on a few years later to be a standout in the series V. Michael Pare would play Tony, again around the same age as Sellecca. Pare would hit cult status a few years later with Eddie and the Cruisers and Streets of Fire. A number of guest stars would show up during the 3 seasons of the series. Clayton Moore, the original Lone Ranger, would make an appearance, as well as John Hart, who also played the Lone Ranger in the series. Jason and Joseph Culp, both sons of Robert, would appear in the show. A very young Bob Saget and Billy Zabka would also pop up during the run, as would Andre the Giant. But perhaps the most endearing memory, other than Ralph flailing crazily in the suit, was the theme song of The Greatest American Hero. Believe it or not, is an earworm of perfection, and more than a few kids my age will find themselves humming it suddenly because it was everywhere in the 80s. The song's music was composed by Mike Post. He's another of those artists that when you look at the history of what they've created, is a list of literally everything you've ever watched. Post had a knack for making TV theme songs that are some of the best around. That included the Rockford Files theme, the A-Team, and Quantum Leap, just to name a few. The catchy lyrics came from Stephen Geyer, another TV music whiz. Geyer worked on shows like Hardcastle and McCormick, and would go on to work on the infamous Cop Rock, something someday we may dare to revisit here. Look, we have to admit that Cop Rock happened. It was real. Believe It or Not was sung by Joey Scarberry. Scarberry sung a number of TV themes over the years. The song would be the biggest hit of his career and would actually hit number 2 on the Billboard charts. The 80s were an interesting time when a number of TV anthems would be hitting radio, and this would include all instrumental ones like Simon & Simons and Hill Street Blues. They were just that good. But Believe It or Not has gone on to show up in other TV series, most famously as George Costanza's answering machine message.
Where could I be? Believe it or not, I'm not home.
It's a piece of pop culture history that, even if you've never watched The Greatest American Hero, chances are you've heard the song at some point. But just like Ralph's attempts at flying, it wasn't always smooth sailing. At the beginning of the series, Cat and Culp didn't really get along. According to Cat, the actors used this in their performances, as Ralph and Bill didn't really mesh well at first either. The two did become good friends over the course of filming, much like their characters. Another bumpy patch came in the form of Warner Brothers and DC Comics. The look and powers that the suit gave Ralph were too much like Superman's for their taste, and they actually sued the show. The lawsuit was thrown out of court, but to me and a number of other people, the series was more Green Lantern than Superman. The little green men would search throughout the galaxy, bestowing superpowers on those they chose to defend green planets like Earth. This is literally the exact thing that happens in making the Green Lantern Corps. They also wear matching white suits with the same emblem on them as Ralph's super suit. Again, a lot like the Green Lantern Corps. The aliens are interesting parts of the series, and something I don't think gets mentioned enough when people talk about it. They have some major powers. UFOs filled with bodies in some sort of suspended animation, and they have the ability to bring the dead back to life. This is some heavy stuff. In the final episode, when Ralph looks for a replacement for the suit, they are able to pull a Doctor Strange and wipe the knowledge of his identity from the planet's mind. When I say final episode, I need to be clear. The Greatest American Hero made it 3 seasons, but was canceled in 1983. The final 4 episodes of the original run weren't aired on ABC as part of that run, but when the series was parceled out for syndication, they were included and shown then and were in the eventual DVD releases. That's when something odd happened, at least for the time. In 1986, NBC decided to give Ralph and Company another shot, and so The Greatest American Heroine was filmed. This was back when rival networks didn't really pick up shows others had bailed on, and especially a spin-off. But the show only made it for a pilot movie, and NBC didn't proceed or even show the pilot. Eventually, it would be released as part of the DVD sets and its own solo release. Nowadays, you can see it on the free streaming service Tubi. The spin-off had Ralph, Pam, and Bill back. With Ralph's identity blown as the guy in the suit, Ralph never did figure out a superhero name. The aliens make a deal with him. Find someone worthy of the suit, and they will wipe the memory of his identity, which has now made him a celebrity, from the world. Eventually, Ralph settles on Holly, an elementary school teacher and good-hearted woman who wants to make the world better. Holly becomes partners with Bill in the same way Ralph did. Over the last decade, a few attempts have happened to try and do a reboot of the show. The last was in 2018 on ABC, which was to have a female lead wearing the suit, but the network didn't pick up the show. 13 years ago, a fan-made web series recreated the original with a 6-episode run from Woohoo Productions, which you can still watch on YouTube. The Greatest American Hero is one of those lightning in a bottle type of shows, I think, which is why no one has ever been able to replicate it. The cast and the creators at the time made it work. The story was a good one that didn't take itself too seriously, but was also earnest. There were some truly strange episodes, like that time Bill got possessed by the ghost of a dead murderous woman. Ralph then went into a weird afterlife dimension where he's attacked by a devil dog. This really did happen, and it was truly trippy. But I think one of the coolest bits of the show was the fact that at the end of the day, the greatest American heroes were both teachers. Ralph and Holly just wanted to help their students learn and to do what was right. And that's who the aliens saw as the best of us, and thanks to the show, kids in the 80s and beyond got to see that too. So if you're interested in watching a classic gem of superhero media, there are plenty of places to watch it online. Freevee, Pluto TV, and Roku are just a few of the many streaming services you can watch the show for free. So there's no excuse not to check out a few episodes of this forgotten gem. You don't even need an instruction manual.